Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new chapter of Discovering Creativity. Today we have a new episode with a special guest. Her name is Sarah Turber. And today we're going to have a special interview and we have some interesting questions for her. So, first of all, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. Welcome. And it's a pleasure for me to have this chance to talk to you for a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, so a lot of people and myself already know a little bit about you because we have made this short investigation, research online where we can find some information about yourself. But of course, we want to hear about you, about yourself. But what can you tell us about yourself? What do you want to tell to the world that doesn't know you? Who is Sarah Turber?
Great question. I am somebody who has been myself really affected by the power of creative thinking, creative problem solving, and also creative collaboration. And I have, for the last 14 years, been running the Foresight Company as the managing partner, where my role is really to combine uh, cognitive diversity, what we know about how people solve problems, and creative problem solving. So people can learn to solve problems more effectively. So my driving mission is to really bring that research, that understanding to the world in a way that people can use actively every day in their lives, in their work, and on their teams.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to hear about that. Because sometimes that's really interesting. A lot of people have a lot of problems just thinking about solutions when sometimes they just need a little bit of help to discover like their strengths or their abilities. And sometimes they need that help. And people like you can help a lot of people to do not just to solve problems, just also to help big companies to grow and stuff like that. And I think that's amazing. So, talking about your work and about this creativity world that you are involved, the first question is, can you tell us about your work at foresight.com, please?
Sure. It's Foresight. The company is called Foresight, and the website is actually foresightonline.com, surprisingly. Um, but but we are a company dedicated to team effectiveness, and we do it with a collaborative problem-solving system based in the science of creativity. So our work at Foresight is used by organizations like Disney and NASA and Nike and Capital One, and our tools and training are designed to help people think more creatively and work more collaboratively and come up with innovative solutions to the complex challenges that they face. So, I mean, if you think about it, a team, which is really the unit that we support, a team is just a group of people with a shared goal. And to reach that goal, people have to work together to overcome the challenges that stand in the way. So, when you think, what is teamwork? Teamwork is often the ability to solve complex challenges together, but that is harder than it looks. And our team at Foresight, at the Foresight Company, studies two things. As I said, one is cognitive diversity. Why do people solve problems so differently?
Mm.
And the second is creative problem solving. Like, how can you give people a common language and process so they can really think better together and come up with new and useful outcomes?
Well, that's so interesting. And uh, you already shared with us a little bit about the next answer, but like, can you tell us a story or give us an example of something that you already lived where you have helped some company that use Foresight company to grow and how they manage to help their employees to grow in that creative way?
Sure. Um, I'll back up a little bit and say that our product is basically an assessment and tools. The assessment measures what we call thinking preferences. So when you engage in the creative problem solving process, where does your energy light up and where does it drift down? And it's very helpful to understand that about yourself as a thinker. Um, so it's also true that teams have thinking preferences. So, in organizations that take this on, and I can think of one in particular in Belgium, a company that was a tiny startup company, and they really had visions of becoming a big tech startup. Um, and they started using the foresight approach, understanding themselves. So people took the foresight thinking profile to understand how they approach a challenge. Do they like to clarify, understand how to understand the problem with facts and information? Or do they like to ideate, coming up with ideas to solve it? Or do they like to take those ideas and develop solutions, kind of an analytical thing? Or do they like to just implement? And when you understand that about yourself, you can manage it in yourself. You can understand, oh, I'm likely to start into this problem by grabbing on with my favorite thinking preference, my favorite way to think. And but if I know that about myself and I know what my teammates are likely to do, I can understand their thinking instead of sitting there and thinking, what are they thinking? I don't want to work with those people. I think they're crazy. So when this becomes a common language across the organization, what it allows is it allows people to continue to collaborate and to overcome those sort of sensitives like, why are they doing that? To really understand, you see it through the lens of foresight and you recognize that person's trying to clarify the problem, which is great because I don't like to do that. And here they are doing that work, contributing that to the team. And so this team in Belgium started to grow and everybody took the foresight thinking profile, including the CEO at the top level of the organization. And they started using creative problem solving as a methodology for taking on the complex problems that they faced. And today they are one of the unicorn companies, meaning they've been funded right up to the top and are thriving and have grown massively. But the person who is their chief people officer is actually writing a book next month. I think it may be coming out very soon, that is looking at how to bring creativity, consciously, deliberate creativity into teams and the organization so that everybody knows themselves, they know each other, and they have a common language to solve problems together. So, we know this is a powerful thinking technology.
Yeah, of course it is, and I think it's one of the newest tools that big companies has, and that they can easily, easily can take the decision to implement on their own company. Because sometimes in these last interviews we have discussed about this problem. Some of these big companies, they are scared of change. So sometimes they hear about all these programs, these new methods, this new way of thinking, and they are like, well, I don't know, this sounds new, we don't know a lot about this, so they prefer to stay the way they are. But sometimes that doesn't help, and it's, we know the results of those kind of situations. So you have shared with us a little bit about the implementation of this program in big companies, and we would like to know about the challenges and the obstacles that you have faced in this journey. Because like you said, sometimes you have problems with, not just with the people, people solve problems, every person, it's different. But of course we have to think about culture, habits, way of thinking, so maybe sometimes religion, maybe sometimes other topics. So can you tell us about all of this?
Sure. Big topic, but sure, I can. I give my best shot. Well, I mean, one of the things that I think you said is so right on target. Most people don't like change. Some people, and we have this research, some people's cognitive preference likes change. We know people who like to ideate like change. They like variety, they like things that are new, but most people do not. And so when you think an organization exists, right? Because it's found a way to create value. And it grows when it finds a way to scale that value and to really produce profit out of that value. So a company originally creates value, but at some point they want to create new value. They innovate, right? But when I use the term create new value, that's the definition of creativity. Creativity is the ability to create new value. So any organization that wants to create new value and to continue to grow and to continue to reach people with something that's going to contribute to their value, they need to engage in this process, whether it's scary or not. We used to talk a lot about creativity, but what we found is that that word actually mostly appeals to people who like to ideate and does not really appeal to people who don't. So we've stopped using creativity and innovation as our lead word for team leaders and tactical leaders. We're talking about the same thing, but we're using it in terms of good teams and effective teams and good problem solving. All the same stuff, but the label on top is not waving the flag of creativity, because we found that creates resistance, ironically. It's what we deliver, it's what we teach. We train people to think in ways that are more expansive and ways that are more, that produce better results. But we don't necessarily tell them that it's creativity that they're doing at every level. I mean, I think you certainly tell the executives, you certainly tell HR and OD, people who recognize that that is the key skill you need. But people on the front lines often experience, I mean, you talk about resistance, the people on the front lines who are leading teams and managing teams, they often feel like creativity and innovation is just going to be a disruption.
Yeah.
And they don't want that. But if you help them understand this is a way to create new value, to make things easier, to make things more efficient, to make things better, they want that. So that's why we changed the language from creativity and innovation. When we're talking to team leaders and managers, we're talking about problem solving and team effectiveness.
Okay, so that opens me a new question, and is this a reality that sometimes in companies, people who are already like grown up adults, they have like a close mind, talking about all of this of creativity, on comparison with young people? Is this a reality?
Interesting question. We have in our research, we don't necessarily find that thinking preferences change over time. So
Right.
if you start with a preference to clarify and you like the facts and the figures and trying to understand the right problem to solve, that's probably likely to be your approach all the way through. But that doesn't mean you can't develop skills in all the other areas. You can become much more skilled at ideating and at developing and at implementing. And, lifelong learners happen at every age. I mean, that's, if you're a learner, that's not age related. We think of young people as learners because we force them to go to school. But, I know a lot of really powerful learners of every age. I don't think age discriminates on who could be a great learner. And what I love about the work we do is, sure, we measure your thinking preference. We measure where you prefer to grab onto a challenge, but we don't measure your thinking capability. That's really up to you. That's something you can develop over the course of a lifetime as an individual, as a team, as an organization. And that is powerful stuff.
And in that case of situation, do you have like a program or some steps to follow to increase your creativity or to help your mind to grow on those areas?
For sure. The funny thing about creativity is people in our culture and generally think of creativity as the same thing as ideation, coming up with ideas. But creativity is the ability to create new and valuable solutions. And that takes more than one kind of thinking. That takes clarifying what's the right problem to solve, then ideating what are the ideas to solve, to use, then developing a solution that will actually work, and then implementing that. And when you put those four things together, you can get a home run solution. And that is a really simple, scientific, proven method of coming up with great solutions. The challenge is that people, when individuals approach that process to clarify and ideate, develop and implement, our brains unconsciously play favorites. So the first step in sort of taking on your thinking and improving or upping your ability to think powerfully is to understand yourself. How are you approaching a challenge? Do you like to clarify, or do you like to ideate or develop or implement, or some combination? Because that will be your unconscious success strategy. That's where you're going to grab onto the challenge first. But that may not be the right place. And when you become conscious of that, you can make a choice. Should I be clarifying? Should I be developing? Should I be implementing first? You can choose if you understand it. So, our work is really all about making those kinds of thinking clear and explicit and revealing people's thinking preferences and then giving them tools, because tools make any job easier, giving them tools to clarify and ideate, develop, and implement better, individually or as teams. So that's sort of the approach.
Wow, that's so great. It's good to know. Surely it's good to know. Well, changing a little bit about all these subjects and going back to talk about yourself, we would like to know and to hear about your latest book, Good Team, Bad Team. Can you tell us about your book?
Sure. Good Team, Bad Team. There's a funny story behind that. I wrote that book with my husband, Blair Miller, who we have worked together as a team for 30 years, supporting team effectiveness and bringing creative thinking to teams. He's been working really on the practitioner side and the academic side. He's a PhD. And I've been working on the publishing side and the making of products and, business side. So when he said, I think it's time to retire after the pandemic, I said, are you kidding? It is not time to retire. You have brought this amazing approach to teamwork and to helping teams get new value. You've delivered that to only the teams that have been able to pay you for it. What if we spent time and created a book together and made this thinking technology available to everyone? Like, that would be amazing. Because by the calculation of his clients over the last 30 years, Blair has helped his clients make and save billions of dollars. Not millions, but billions with a B. And that's the value that good teams can produce, that new value that they can produce if you know how to do it. And he knows how to do it, and I know how to do it too. So we're like, okay, we're going to write a book about foresight, basically, and what we do and how we approach teams. And we started working with a woman who is a book coach. She's an amazing writer and, helps writers write their book. And her first thing was, well, a book is not about something. We thought, what? We have to write a book about foresight. What do you mean a book is not about something? And she said, a book is for someone. So think about what you have and who needs it most and write for them. So we completely recalibrated what we were going to say and who we were going to write for. And we wrote this book, and it's called Good Team, Bad Team. And it's for team leaders who want their people to go after big challenges, not each other. And so we incorporate, the first part of the book is know yourself, to understand your thinking preferences. And then the next part is know your team, understand how others are going to approach challenges and how team dynamics are going to play into that. And part of what you asked was about culture, about team purpose, about, how that all fits together. So that's all team development, that's all in there. And then the last part of the book, part 3, is really know your challenge. So it's understanding how these 4 types of thinking operate as a problem-solving process and how they are the same kinds of thinking that power up design thinking or Lean Six Sigma or Agile or any other kind of expert model of thinking that you may come across. It all kind of boils down to those same 4 types of thinking. And when you have that as a common language, it can cut across cultural differences, generational differences, gender differences, all kinds of differences, because what we're measuring there is a kind of diversity, cognitive diversity, that's hidden, but that's hidden in plain sight. It's everywhere. It's on your team. And once you understand it, instead of fighting against it and having it be a point of resistance and frustration and conflict, it becomes one of those powerful things your team has got, because you learn how to harness everybody's best thinking. So that's the book we wrote, and it's been really fun. Forbes listed it as their #1 recommendation for CEOs who want to help their teams realize their full potential. So it's getting out there a little bit, and we are super excited about it.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that, and I think it's great. And I mean, that's a great story, and that you wrote that book with your husband, with your partner. I mean, I think that's a great story. And I mean, we know marriage is a team, so like working in team for writing a book that it will help you to work in team. I mean, that's great. And
Well,
I have,
I have to say, we call that team good team, bad team, because, you know, when you work with human beings, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to
yeah,
be amazing all the time. Our marriage is really good, but it's not perfect all the time. And writing that book was really good, but it wasn't perfect all the time. And so, part of it is giving each other the grace to fall down, to stand back up, to try it again, to get back in the game. And we learn that over and over, of course, as you would, as you do on a team.
yeah, I can imagine that, like, you had like maybe a hard day or something, a short discussion. You were like reading your notes, and okay, yeah, we wrote about this. I know what to do. Yeah,
It's true. We now use this stuff on each other.
yeah, yeah. Before we publish it, we need to put it in practice.
So
Yeah,
true.
yeah. That's so interesting. I love it. Um, okay, so a lot of students and young people from Mexico and from the United States are gonna be watching this episode and this material. So, do you have any advice to all of them? We already spoke a little bit about increasing and improving creativity, but we want to know if you have any advice or strategy to help young people to improve or increase their abilities in teamwork.
Mm, what a great question. You know, um, I feel like, at least in the States, we're not taught anything about how to be on a team. You're supposed to just somehow figure that out. You're
Mhm.
supposed to just somehow go through an education where you're always being graded individually, you're always being assessed individually, you're always being tested individually, and then you go into work and you're supposed to work on a team. And somehow we're supposed to have that all figured out. I actually coach uh, a, a sports team at the local public high school. I coach their field hockey team partly
Oh,
because I think it's so important for people to learn how to be on a team. And if you never had that experience, you probably won't get it growing up in, at least in the United States education system. But once you understand the power of combining thinking, of how to co-create and how to think better together, and what other people's thinking can contribute to yours, like that brings your thinking to a level of power that you can't have unless you have a team. I mean, you think of a field hockey team. You put one person out there, they will lose the game. But you
yeah,
put 11 people out there and they understand how to work together, and you train them on how to work optimally together, and how, in the case of an organizational team, how to think optimally together, they can win almost anything. And I guess my advice would be, understand your thinking preference. Use that as an access point to understand the creative process itself. Because if you like to clarify, or if you rather ideate, or you like to develop, or you like to implement, suddenly you can see yourself in the creative process. You can see where you naturally contribute, where you will naturally bring energy to a team. And you can voice that in a job interview. You can voice that when you join a team. And when you have a low preference and your energy is going to be like, you can talk to someone about that and say, hey, I'm running out of energy here. Can you help me think through this part? People love to be asked, people love to contribute to you. So it's not something to hide necessarily. I mean, you want to get better at things that are low preference. You want tools, you want to be effective at that. But you can also call in, call a friend, and get and let other people contribute to you, just as you can contribute to them where they have low preferences, and might really appreciate just that energy lift that your thinking can contribute.
Well, that's such great advice, and I personally think that's really good because sometimes, like you said, some people like wants to hide that part, like the part of I'm a human being. I also have needs. Maybe I'm the leader. I'm the helper. I'm the one that solves problems. But sometimes I also need help, and sometimes I'm not in my best position. I also have problems. I also have to deal with stress, family issues, trust issues, and some other stuff that maybe my company, my team doesn't know about. But sometimes to show that part, that human part to your folks, will create a better environment and probably will build confidence and trust each other. And I think that's great to accept that we are human beings and that we're not perfect and that we're all in this together.
I love
That's
that. I'm
that's all.
so for that. I
Great.
did that very well.
Okay, so I have a last question, and it's like, okay, so we are here talking about all this process and we are understanding, but what happens when we need to deal with a person who is really close and that doesn't want to hear anything about all of this and that it's hard to work with them? Like, what can you tell us about that kind of situation? What can we do, or what should we do, or what we shouldn't try to do with those kind of people?
Can I just clarify? Are you talking about people who, when you talk about creativity and creative problem solving, specifically that, or something more broadly?
Well, it's a little bit more about creativity and about when we're working in team. So it's just about all those two topics.
Okay, all right. So, again, I think it's worth knowing. I mean, I have a Master of Science in Creativity and Change Leadership. I came into this field waving the creativity flag, waving the innovation flag, thinking this is the bomb, this is the greatest. I was not aware that that language was going to be alienating and off putting to other people. I just didn't know because it's not alienating or off putting to me. I actually was part of a group called a Vistage group where organizational leaders go and talk about leadership and talk about their companies and what they could do. And there were maybe 16 people who were leading different companies. And our facilitator learned about foresight from me and loved foresight. And he got certified so that he could deliver the foresight assessment. And he actually delivered the assessment to every single one of those other business owners. And then he came back to me and he said, Sarah, what you have, every business needs.
Mhm.
And the way you talk about it is creativity and innovation and creative problem solving. None of them realize they need it because they're not hearing what you're saying. You need to be able to talk to them in language that acknowledges their pain points. So, really, rather than, we all get pretty excited about creativity when we learn what it is and what it can do. But rather than come barging into the room, waving that flag, insisting that everybody drink your Kool-Aid,
Uh-huh.
which I did, it took me years to sort of let that take a back seat
Okay.
and try to really understand what are other people's pain points? What are the
Mhm.
problems they're trying to solve? What keeps them up at night? And how can you give them even just small tools like, hey, could you phrase that as a question? Like, how might you solve that problem? Or can you learn to receive ideas with praise first, where you sort of flip instead of criticism first and telling them what won't work about their idea, like tell them what you like about their idea. Really small, itty bitty changes that change their outcomes. Then they want to know, how did you do that? How could I do more of that? And suddenly you're having the conversation that you wanted to have when you first came in the room, waving that creativity flag. That's my experience. And I am a slow learner, and it took me a really long time to learn that. But I feel like I'm finally getting it. Um,
Well, that's so interesting, and I mean that makes sense. Some people will share your ideas immediately. Some people will take their own time, and that's the point. That's their own time, not my time. Because in our time, we will be well, the happiest person if everybody shared the same idea. But that's not reality. And sometimes we need to be patient. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that answer and, well, all of these answers. And, well, we still have time for another question.
Okay.
And I would like to close this interview with the next thing. Uh, if you can give us to this podcast audience maybe a phrase, a sentence, an advice, something that has changed your personal life in whatever area you want to share, what can you tell us? Like, what will you tell us if I need an advice or just a phrase or something to help me to maybe feel better or to be excited or to be motivated? What do you want to share with us?
I think I love that question. Hard question. But the thing that when I think of actually what I do and what I use a really simple clarifying tool. Um, and it's sort of was introduced years and years ago before we had neuroscience to justify why we came up with it. But it's the simple act of phrasing a problem as a question. So we all experience frustration and, things that get us emotionally low or are off putting or feel daunting. And the self talk that you do is really important. When you frame what you're experiencing as fact, like, he's a jerk, I hate this job, or I'll never be good at this, your brain is very obedient.
Mm.
Your brain will listen to that talk and try to make that happen for you. That is not what you want.
No.
That's not even what you're trying to make your brain do. You're trying to kind of cathart, but your brain is listening to it quite literally. Like, you're programming your brain with that kind of language. So instead of programming your brain with, I hate this doesn't work, this will never work, which is kind of a natural way to do it, what helps me is to flip that script and ask my brain a question like, how might I improve that relationship? How might I make that work? What are all the ways I could improve this situation? And suddenly, that's the programming your brain is getting. So instead of like, I hate it, it'll never work, your brain is starting to churn on, oh, yeah, how could I fix that? How could I improve that? What are the ideas I have for that? And your brain will unconsciously go to work for you. And surprisingly, what will manifest is a solution or fragment of a solution. And you can start building on that. And that really is so emblematic that this work, this creativity work, is really an operating system, a mental operating system for change, for positive change. So when you start working with it like that, as how you're going to program your own brain, the outcomes you get will be astonishing.
Wow, that's so good. I love that answer, and I personally will take it home. I mean, that's great, and I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing all these answers, for sharing a small, huge part of you, because we already see how passionate you are about all of these subjects. And thank you so much for taking this in a way that we can help each other to understand and to improve our knowledge in creativity, working team, self confidence, and a lot of other subjects that we can talk for hours. But
We
anyway,
could definitely talk for hours. It's been
yeah.
so much fun to talk with you, and thank you for your questions. It's
Well,
been
thank
really
you.
delightful.
Thank you so much. I had a great time with you. It was a pleasure to meet you. And to everybody will hear or see this video, thank you so much for being here. And hopefully, this will make a change in your personal, professional life. Thank you so much for sharing and hope to see you soon, maybe in another interview or in some other project.
Thank you so much. It's great. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Sarah. You too.